For more than 40 years, Gene Hackman carried a reputation that made him both one of Hollywood's greatest actors and one of its most intimidating forces. He was uncompromising, relentless, and deeply committed to the truth inside every role he played. To directors, he could be brilliant one moment and volcanic the next. To Hackman, filmmaking was never a game. It was work, serious work, and he expected everyone around him to match his intensity. For decades, he kept his frustrations private, refusing to speak openly about the directors he clashed with. But reaching 90 gave him a kind of clarity age often brings. With no career to protect and no need to soften the truth, he finally admitted what insiders always suspected. There were directors he absolutely hated working with, names he remembered not for genius or collaboration, but for tension, incompetence, ego, and methods he found impossible to respect. These experiences shaped the way he viewed Hollywood, revealing a side of the industry the public rarely saw. Hackman always believed that directors should guide actors, not control them. He rejected the idea that performers were just pieces on a board or props in someone else's vision. From his earliest days in the industry, he made it clear that he would not tolerate being treated like a tool. He believed actors had something essential to contribute, and when directors dismissed that contribution, the relationship collapsed. Hackman didn't respond well to orders delivered without explanation. He didn't trust filmmakers who seemed unsure of themselves. And he had no patience for directors who hid insecurity behind aggression, cruelty, or condescension. Over time, those clashes became part of his legend, especially with 6 directors who pushed him past the point of tolerance. The first name on that list was Wes Anderson, the highly stylized filmmaker behind the Royal Tenenbaums. The role of Royal was written specifically for Hackman, but Hackman didn't want to do the movie, didn't like the small salary, and didn't believe in a young director enough to endure weeks of shooting. He came into the project suspicious, irritated, and openly resistant. Anderson, still early in his career, had the meticulous style and youthful confidence Hackman found grating. Their personalities clashed immediately. Hackman viewed him as unproven and overly precious in his approach. On set, Hackman's temper flared. He snapped at Anderson, insulted him, and dismissed him in front of the cast. At one point, he told him to pull up your pants and act like a man, a remark that became infamous behind the scenes. The tension became so thick that other actors stepped in to protect Anderson from Hackman's temper. Even though the film became a classic and Hackman won a Golden Globe for his performance, he left with bitterness. He never worked with Anderson again and made no secret of the fact that he despised the experience. If Anderson represented a young director he didn't respect, Donald Petrie represented a different kind of frustration. Welcome to Mooseport, Hackman's final film before retirement, was a light political comedy he never believed in. He didn't think the script was strong, didn't enjoy the tone, and didn't see the project as worthy of his time. That alone created pressure, but the real conflict erupted between Hackman and Petrie. Co-star Maura Tinney later said the two did not get along at all, and she wasn't exaggerating. Hackman repeatedly challenged Petrie's decisions, openly questioned his competence, and dismissed his direction. During one explosive exchange, Hackman reportedly told the director to shut the F*** up and go say action, reducing Petrie to a bystander on his own set. Whether or not every detail is accurate, the pattern was unmistakable. Hackman resented the way Petrie handled production, and the discomfort on set pushed him toward the decision to permanently step away from acting. The film symbolized everything he hated: weak material, chaotic direction, and forced attempts at comedy that went nowhere. Barry Sonnenfeld, the director of Get Shorty, experienced another version of Hackman's distrust. Before the film even got off the ground, Hackman confronted Sonnenfeld and told him he didn't think he was right for the job. Sonnenfeld had only recently transitioned from cinematography to directing, and Hackman believed he lacked the authority and experience needed to guide a cast that included big personalities. Throughout the early stages of production, Hackman's skepticism was visible. He questioned the tone, doubted the direction, and made no effort to hide his lack of confidence. Although Sonnenfeld ultimately earned Hackman's respect as the film came together, the tension at the start was unforgettable. Hackman hated working with directors he didn't trust from the first day, and his instinctive suspicion made the experience stressful for everyone involved. Sonnenfeld later joked about the confrontation, but the seriousness behind it was real. These early clashes in Hackman's career in later years revealed a man who felt deeply protective of his craft. For him, a bad director wasn't just an annoyance, it was a threat to the integrity of the work. Hackman demanded vision, competence, and respect, and when he didn't get it, the relationship burned fast. These first three directors represented the most common types he despised: the unproven, the incompetent, and the indecisive. But the list didn't end there. There were others, more experienced, more respected, whose methods clashed so violently with Hackman's beliefs that he walked away from the films carrying scars he never wanted to revisit. The next name on Hackman's list was William Friedkin, the director of The French Connection, the film that earned Hackman his first Academy Award and cemented his place among the greatest actors of his generation. Audiences saw a fearless, explosive performance that felt brutally authentic. What they didn't see was a deep conflict boiling behind the camera. Hackman never felt comfortable playing Popeye Doyle. He thought the character was too cruel, too morally corrupt, and too far removed from who he was as a person. Friedkin pushed him relentlessly, demanding harsher, louder, more violent energy at every turn. Hackman felt suffocated by the direction, convinced he was being manipulated into a performance he didn't believe in. At one point, he even asked Friedkin to fire him from the movie, insisting he wasn't right for the role. The two men clashed so often that the set became a battleground of wills. Friedkin, famous for his aggressive methods, pushed Hackman toward emotional places he resisted, while Hackman pushed back against what he saw as unnecessary brutality. When the film became a masterpiece, their conflicts were hidden beneath the praise. But Hackman never forgot the misery of the process or the strain of being forced into a character he fundamentally disliked. Even though the collaboration produced one of the greatest performances of his career, it remained one of the experiences he hated most. Stanley Kramer, director of The Domino Principle, represented another painful chapter. Kramer was already a respected filmmaker with a long, established career, and Hackman entered the project expecting trust and stability. Instead, nearly every day on set became an argument. Hackman didn't believe the story worked and felt the film was directionless, overly complicated, and built on ideas that didn't translate well to the screen. His frustration with the script bled into his relationship with Kramer. He challenged decisions, interrupted rehearsals, and brought a level of tension that Kramer found exhausting. Kramer kept a detailed diary throughout production, documenting the near-constant conflict with Hackman. When the diary was later published, Hackman read it and admitted it was painfully accurate. He described it as embarrassing but fair, acknowledging that his temper and dissatisfaction turned him into a difficult presence. Unlike other directors on his list, Hackman eventually understood that part of the conflict came from within himself. Still, the experience left a mark. He hated working with Kramer because the film's weaknesses amplified his own frustrations, creating a pressure cooker where neither man could find common ground. David Anspaugh, director of the beloved sports drama Hoosiers, became another conflict point for Hackman. Ironically, the film is now considered one of the greatest sports movies ever made, and Hackman's performance is cherished. But behind the scenes, the atmosphere was tense. Hackman initially didn't want to take the role at all. He only accepted it because he needed the money, not because he believed in the project. Almost immediately, he found himself uncomfortable with the tone, the script, and the emotional style of the movie. He clashed with Anspaugh over performance choices, pacing, and the direction of key scenes. The on-set tension grew so visible that it affected the overall environment. Co-star Barbara Hershey struggled with him at times, and the dynamic increased the pressure on Anspaugh, who was still relatively new to directing. Hackman believed the director wasn't managing the emotional needs of the cast effectively, and the strained relationship created friction in nearly every major scene they worked on together. Even though Hoosiers became a timeless film, Hackman never softened toward the experience. The resentment lingered, and he quietly added Anspaugh to the mental list of directors he hoped never to cross paths with professionally again. Barry Sonnenfeld's situation had been about trust. Friedkin's was about emotional force. Kramer's was about frustration. Anspaugh's was about misalignment. With Donald Petrie, the problem had been incompetence, or at least a perception of it. But the conflict with Wes Anderson stood out because Hackman felt tricked into a movie he didn't want to make and forced into a dynamic where a young director's style clashed violently with his own instincts. All these directors represented different shades of the same problem. The moment a director stopped listening to him, understanding him, or guiding the project with clarity, Hackman's patience evaporated completely. As Hackman reflected on his long career, these experiences formed consistent thread. He hated working with directors who lacked control, lacked confidence, or lacked empathy for their actors. He hated the feeling of being pushed into performances he didn't believe in or asked to carry films he thought were fundamentally broken. He hated shoots where tension replaced trust and where the director either ran the set with fear or let it slide into chaos. Through all these clashes, he developed a simple rule he lived by. If a director didn't respect the actor's contribution, the collaboration was doomed before it even started. 3 more directors, 3 more battles, and 3 more reasons Hackman closed the book on Hollywood with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. And in the final chapter of his reflections, he revealed exactly what these clashes taught him, and why they pushed him to walk away from acting forever. By the time Hackman reached the final years of his career, he had built a private understanding of the kinds of directors he could never tolerate again. Each bad collaboration taught him something about the delicate balance between actor and filmmaker, and how quickly the entire process could crumble when trust was replaced with tension. Hackman didn't hate easily, but when he felt a director had disrespected the craft, ignored the actor's instincts, or failed to control the set, the resentment became permanent. These 6 directors stayed with him not because of personal grudges, but because each one represented a different type of failure that made the work unbearable. Looking back, Hackman acknowledged that he wasn't always easy to work with. His temper, intensity, and blunt honesty sometimes escalated situations that might have been solved with patience. Yet he also believed that directors had a responsibility to earn an actor's trust, and too many of them relied on authority instead of understanding. With Wes Anderson, the problem was generational. Anderson's youth, stiff aesthetic, and precise style clashed with Hackman's old-school instincts. Hackman didn't see him as someone who understood actors, and the friction exploded into open hostility. With Donald Petrie, the issue was competence. Hackman felt trapped in a film he didn't respect, guided by a director whose instincts he didn't trust. That combination created resentment that grew with every passing day on set. Barry Sonnenfeld showed Hackman the danger of judging too soon. Hackman admitted he had underestimated him from the moment they met. Although the film eventually proved Sonnenfeld capable, the early tension revealed that Hackman hated entering a project with uncertainty about the director's skills. Trust needed to exist immediately, or the entire relationship started from a damaged place. With William Friedkin, the conflict went deeper. Friedkin pushed Hackman into emotional and ethical corners he despised, forcing him to embody a character he felt was repulsive. The methods behind the performance, the relentless pressure, and the emotional demands destroyed any chance of comfort between them. Hackman respected the results but hated the experience. Stanley Kramer represented a collaboration that fell apart because the film itself didn't work. Hackman couldn't invest in material he didn't believe in. His frustration with the script bled into every interaction with Kramer. Their arguments, documented in the director's diaries, were constant. Hackman later admitted he behaved badly, but the resentment had already taken root. David Anspaugh, on Hoosiers, became another reminder that even a great film can come from a miserable environment. Hackman disliked the tone, didn't trust the direction, and felt emotionally disconnected from the project from the beginning. Clashing visions, strained relationships with co-stars, and frustration with the director's inexperience made the shoot tense from start to finish. Taken together, these 6 directors formed a pattern of clashing philosophies, mismatched expectations, and broken trust. Hackman didn't hate them as people. He hated the conditions they created. He hated losing faith in the director's command. He hated working with filmmakers who didn't understand actors, ignored instinct, or forced performances from a place of control rather than collaboration. To him, acting required vulnerability. A director who didn't protect that vulnerability became a threat to the entire process. As he reflected at 90, Hackman wasn't interested in rewriting history or pretending these conflicts never happened. He had outgrown the need to hide his frustrations behind Hollywood diplomacy. The industry had changed. The directors he once battled had become symbols of eras he no longer wished to revisit. And he understood that his own explosive nature, combined with his fierce loyalty to the craft, created relationships that could not survive tension, weakness, or disrespect. What these 6 experiences ultimately revealed was the emotional cost of a career spent fighting for sincerity inside a system built on compromise. Hackman never wanted to be part of the Hollywood machine. He wasn't a celebrity chasing fame. He was an actor searching for truth, and he expected the directors around him to be just as committed. When they weren't, the backlash was immediate. He knew he was demanding. He knew he was tough. But he also believed he was right. Retiring after Welcome to Mooseport wasn't only about age or exhaustion. It was a culmination of decades of battles with directors he couldn't stand, working on films that drained more than they gave. Some actors can endure weak leadership, chaotic sets, or directors who treat them like interchangeable parts. Gene Hackman was not one of them. He needed leadership, clarity, respect, and vision. Anything less turned filmmaking into a war he no longer had the energy to fight. The truth he revealed at 90 wasn't dramatic gossip. It was a private testimony of a man who gave everything to his craft and refused to pretend otherwise. The directors he hated didn't ruin his career, but they shaped his exit from it. They became reminders of how fragile creative partnerships can be, and how quickly brilliance can collapse when the guiding hand behind the camera loses its grip. What do you think? Was Hackman justified in these clashes, or did his intensity make him impossible for some directors to manage? If you want more Hollywood revelations and hidden truths from cinema's greatest legends, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.